Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And oh man, I'm back with another fucking useless commentary here. So, one thing straight, my channel was suspended because I uploaded a recording of someone from the debate com I was trying to expose. So, yeah, whatever fucking happened there, YouTube's, AI verification system, this and that, like, that also kind of prohibited me a bit, until, like, I fucking provided, like, that shit and all that. So I'm back, and, like, I think the AI verification system just, like, yeah, I don't know, man. But I'm back, and what I want to talk about specifically, because this is a big take I want to have, like this is well, not what I want to have. This one that I actually hold to a lot. Like, so I remember in my other commentary vid, like I said that like a lot of like debaters hold to like rhetoric more over substance. So towards like propositions, just like debating propositions in general. So I want to sit here and give my analysis, or just like not even analysis, more so just like internal critique of some debates. Give me a minute. There's some background problems. Yeah, I'm back. So, what specifically am I definitely going to be giving an internal critique about? So, these are my judgments on some debates. My judgment isn't really like it's not absolute. So if you have disagreements, like obviously disagreements with some of my verdicts, you can say here, tell me in the comments, give your critiques about that, and we can discuss or we can just talk about it. Like you don't have to discuss anything. Like you can just give your honest opinion. I don't really mind because like I'm not gonna force into discussion where like like you're such a retard, this and that. Like no, I don't really play with that. Like so many people play like that. Like they act like they're cool with you, this and that, but they're just like a big retard. So firstly, the first analysis of which I want to give is Apollo versus Tron, not the old debate, but like the new debate. So the atheistic stance versus the theistic stance. Who won that? So my honest opinion, I have no glaze. I think Apollo won that. So the reason why I think Apollo won that is because simply he brought up the propositional contradiction thing in which he brought over towards more so obviously speaking, he brought like the internal critique of Tron's stance, which he was supposed to give an argumentative portion of like like obviously because like he held towards theistic views more so, and if it was true, more so highly probable, he would be saying more so. Obviously, this proposition has more parsimonious justification, or just more so epistemic, parsimony in that sense, like epistemic economy to be accepted, or this to be accepted more so as definitely or given some form of well actual greater propositional value, which is highlighted in truth, where obviously distributed by LEM. Obviously you can't hold to the false one because obviously when you hold towards a necessary being like God, obviously most theistic models God is obviously like a necessary being. That would make him like an S5 modal axiom. He would have to be epistemically accessible, nomologically accessible, metaphysically accessible. There can be contradictions. So because even then, even if you sit here and say it's more probable than it is certain, you are still affirming it's more so likely for the truth value, right? So he just offered to give the argument, right? Go over the argument part. So here's the thing though. Apollo wanted him to give the contradiction with the atheistic stance view. So Tron was like, oh no, so I could just give the argument right now because I don't care about semantics, this and that, because they were doing some form of like semantic mumbo jumbo. It's just like a bunch of retarded shit, but like more so in that sense. He still asked for the contradiction. He just proceeded to give the argument, right? So I feel like Apollo's ontological economy objection, I honestly think it was decent. I don't really think, Tron was more so in the part, like into the first part. I kind of think that's what kind of well, because like he didn't really fulfill the first burden or anything. He just gave the argument for the proposition. He didn't like highlight any type of contradiction, so that still pertains that, obviously there's the case of that, but like because he took the stance, there would obviously be taken there's contradictions within, obviously assuming the atheistic stance more so because obviously God would be held as a moral rational agent, this and that, because obviously moral essence being applicable towards the being, and then there is the thing about obviously the or so just the essence of God, obviously the essence of God, this and that, more so. This is the essence of God, the applicable sets of attributes, or just like the set of attributes, this and that, which is applicable to God. You need God for that. That's obviously mere logical utility for that. So obviously you cannot hold God exists without, obviously the essence is part. So it would have to be reflexive with holding towards God and both sides. It has to be symmetrical relationship with God is needed to exist to claim that these are the sets of attributes or just like the set of attributes. My bad. So the claim it is a set of attributes. You need God. That's a symmetrical relationship right there. Obviously speaking, that's analytical. So he is claiming it's more likely. Therefore, there is the contradiction, right? So the contradiction is obviously saying that obviously So like, the first point is that he didn't provide the structure. You could say further within the dialectical progression, since he gave the argument that would provide why there's a contradiction. But here's the thing, though. He still didn't answer with the contradiction part. Therefore, obviously him given that wouldn't really win him the first point at all. Like the first point, as I mentioned, was like mainly on semantics, and then they moved on onto like the argumentation. It's like the first part was about stances and upon the proposition, like not the argument for the proposition. So the substance in itself is obviously distincted. So the first point I would say goes to Apollo just because of that. He didn't really answer that. Just talked a bit on semantics, saying it's certain this and that. They even then saying it's more likely would sit there and say, oh well, so I believe because of this is more consistent data for God existing this and that, obviously the substance would work as, obviously the substantive towards a proposition as a theory of truth, this and that. So sorry, back about that. So obviously that would be the substantive more so, but the thing was on semantics, so obviously that would convey the part about that part. So like yeah. Well, that conveys my judgment about that part of the specific debate because he didn't highlight that. It's until they started debating about the substance of the argument, not necessarily the proposition in itself. Obviously, the argument is coextensive with the proposition, but like we're talking about the dialectic itself, not the proposition within the dialectic. So, the dialectic dialogue. So more so I think there's like heavy distinctions between the dialectic and the proposition in itself. So the argument is coextensive with the proposition, but it's a distinct point that's coextensive with that specific dialectical progression within the dialectic or the dialectical framework they operate under. So, under that point, the first point I think fairly goes to Apollo, obviously because the distinctions made between the proposition argument and then obviously the first point just being based upon semantics and trying not really obviously given that because trying to offer is implication towards the proposition as a substantial, but the thing is he wanted the implication for the contradiction, like he wanted the contradiction like why it's this and that, he just said it's more likely, but that's still affirming it's more likely to be the case. So accepting it's more likely to be the case, still that's still contradictory towards atheistic views. So I guess you could say the substance was given in the second point of the debate. But like, yeah, no, they just moved on to the point where the arguments. Like, yeah, the second point, I would have to look into that. But the first point, obviously Apollo, I think. So second point, let's get into it. The argument for God in which Tron uses, specifically speaking, like I'm not gonna hold it to you. I still think because he didn't like call out that contradiction specifically, the contradiction wouldn't exactly. Well, I think him not calling out the contradiction would still leave some form of like dilemma. Just like so, I would say it's more so a dilemma because of the lack of an answer. Like the argument would provide an implication of an answer, but like obviously he didn't answer directly within the dialogue, so you can't precisely say it's within the dialectic or verbatim within the dialectic. So I don't think it obviously holds within the dialect. So yeah, no, there's like a dilemma from Tron specifically. So I think Apollo is just more so proposition justified or just like substantially justified and like accepting that atheistic view over the because of the argument, itself being the substantia and the substance more so upon the proposition part. I think he's more justified in the sense because Tron's dilemma, I think he was more having does that justify just justification within the fucking moment there of this conversation. So yeah, back onto the argument point. So fuck. I still think that wins him the entire debate because that would backtrack the second point Tron was trying to get about the argument. So dilemma point, you could sit here and say the progression to that is regressed. Obviously the epistemic there's like an aggression within epistemology here. So like the epistemic, just like what serves as like epistemic constitution, would more so serve as a regression back towards the point because of the dome. So like I think Apollo still wins second point just because of the first point. So yeah, I gave my reasoning for the first point and like second point's followed up from it. So you can sit here and say it's more so a set of dualistic propositions which are inclusive and already answered because obviously the inclusivity towards the propositions and the substantias are also inclusive of both. So yeah, that's about my verdict right there for that. So my analysis on that, my commentary is that I think Tron optically did good as well, right? I think Apollo substantively is definitely better because like Tron argumentatively why is like I think he sat there and more so gave a true argument, I guess, but more so like something Apollo wasn't able to directly hinge upon. So second point definitely is pretty close, but I'm only giving it to Apollo because the first point part. So like definitely I'd say second point Tron did optically good, like argumentatively, like I wouldn't say defensively, but offensively it's pretty good as an argument. Well, it does have its flaws, but not everybody is gonna obviously have the perfect knowledge or just like the specifically like actual like good rhetoric, just in general like capability to like obviously implement it. Like I think the second one was just like very weak between the two. Like that's what kind of made the like debate in general just like bad. So like at the same time, I think I think Apollo won that. So um argumentatively and offensively, Tron had that, but substantively and defensively, of course, obviously, because Apollo was also put on the defense from what Tron was like saying. It's just like he was put on the offense inside point one. So I gotta hand it to point one. I think Apollo had the better offense in terms of like obviously arguing substantively when asking the questions. Obviously, the burden to answer this and etc. like that obviously would go to Apollo. So obviously, by virtue of that, I think definitely better offense within the first point. Tron was able to capitalize on the argument, obviously against Apollo. I think offensively, first point Apollo, offensively for arguing more so second point instead of like Apollo this time. I think it was Tron, but defensively Apollo did decent. But because of the offense from point one, I think that already weakened Tron's stability for arguing. So I think in conclusion, I just think like it kind of regressed the point being made. So I think from offense one, Apollo like just with the first offensive like, attack, like just like first offensive like substantials within point one, I think it follows as Apollo definitely fucking like F5'd him or just landed an RKO in general. So my second analysis, be right back. I gave my first analysis, so it's time for our transmission. Nigger. I'm back. Just give me a second. I'm dumping out like it's cold water right now. It's old, man. You know. So, secondly, another analysis I want to do back, back to the fucking show. Finally, after the transmission, Shinra versus Bucci. Honestly, I already think Bucci was fucking slamming from the first point. Like, it was just like so fucking retarded as Shinra. Like, he held to relative identity of a fetus and a person. So here's the thing: relative identity would have to be preserved by time frames, obviously speaking, because a fetus is not a non-genetical fucking functioning organ, because it still has to function based upon the other person. So obviously it would be reliant on that point, biologically speaking. If you deny that, that's already like fucking biological axiom. So if you deny that, that's already a contradiction towards human anatomy, and that wouldn't even line up with our epistemology about human anatomy. So that would already just be a contradiction. And you cannot hold contradictions towards human anatomy because that would be really distinct in the first place. The nature would obviously be distinct. So you can't classify them both because of contradiction, obviously speaking. So I don't know what Shimura was aiming for with the fetus and abortion part, but Pucci was able to capitalize on that. He mentioned the functioning about that point. So already in the first point, I think Pucci was slamming, but in general consideration towards Shinra during the dialectic, he obviously had like pretty good defense. Well, not pretty good, but decent defense. He had defensive points, which were pretty good in my opinion. Well, not pretty good, decent. Sorry, I'm not trying to contradict myself for my verdict. So like, just I'm just like saying words, which is like obviously you could take the indicator, like social cue, man. So, um, obviously speaking, I think Shinra was able to get back up from his feet after being like rhetorically smacked the fuck down or just like given a punch in the face. I think he was able to progressively defend himself from Pucci, but ultimately, like speaking wise, I just think Pucci was able to get the one just based off like dominating this dude. Because first of all, his tracking in the beginning, like during the debate, was also it just went from low to mid. So speaking wise, I just think like he kind of lost like his tracking ability was not on point. Like arguing wise, he got back up defensively, but offensively he was not doing too great. I think Pucci was able to get a elbow drop, this and that, but it's kind of bad in that point, retrospect. So yeah, I think my verdict still stays the same as I commented on back on Curl's vid. I just think Pucci landed an RKO. He won that like because like I'm not like a Glazer at Pucci. Like I debated the dude myself. I think he's like decent. He's not that bad. Like, but I mean like in some consideration, like yeah, he's still decent. It's not that bad. I definitely did. He did think he did beat Shinra on the abortion debate. So but props to Shinra for being able to get back up on his feet. Like not many debaters are capable of doing it because like half of them in the community, as I've already discussed, back upon like more so within like the community and past commentary videos. I already hold that like half the community or just like most of the community is like a quarter of the community is so fucking bad they can't track and they just laugh this and that, fake laugh this and that. Like obviously they try and game rhetoric points over substance, so it's like kind of bad in my opinion. But props to him for actually getting back up and able to actually deal some substance, Like so obviously it's definitely good to see that, Definitely good to see some heart kicking inside the calm, like you know, it's better. It's just better, So moving on from that, that was my judgment on the analysis on that. Um, so what other debate do I want to review? So a debate which I want to review for a long time, essentially speaking, I think this is definitely one of the more few talked about. Like it's large scale talked about. So what I am talking about is more so. Well, actually, I might just give you some light on like some other like smaller debates. So, real quick. What else? What else? What else? What else? Fuck. Okay, yeah, I think I have it now. Simba versus Apollo, like part one, not like part two. But this was like an LP. It was about like the veganism debate, I think. Well, eh. Um, part two actually, part two. Yeah, actually, I'll cover the LPOE. Apollo has some really good debates with Simba, like two, like they're pretty good, both of them. So obviously, I think both of them have some pretty clear goodness over them. Like I haven't fully checked out like the other airiness of it, but I do know like I checked out like part one. I thought Apollo was doing fine. So another part I want to cover was LPOE. One of the parts I'm not even gonna comment on entirely. It's just like one of the parts that I noticed. But Apollo sit there and said that his ethics are best model. Ethics wouldn't have, obviously speaking, like a lack of evil in it. So that would obviously quit the Omni properties. Yeah, he's over there. Sorry, talking background, but yeah. So I just think like the whole point is disproving the contract. Just think the Omni properties. So that's fine. It's fine. You can disprove Omni properties, but like that doesn't disprove Apollo's model or just like substantive. So on that point, I think Apollo slapped definitely just because of lack of tracking. Like the debate com has so many problems with tracking. It's not funny. Like Gyro, for example. Gyro, he's bad. No offense to him, may he get better, inshallah. Like more so, like I've already slapped the dude like on LPOE. It's bad, or just like my argument against it. He tried to debate me on that. I slammed him. Just more so like he wasn't attacking at all. Um, what else do I want to cover? I think my debate with Tron would be good. So my debate with Tron, I know his massive reductio, which is like the point people go on, was like, obviously speaking about like, oh, miscarriages and iron abortion. But like, I don't care. The whole point relies on like biological continuity. Biological continuity is still dismissed by miscarriages, denying that is when it's a biological axiom. So miscarriages happening is a biological axiom. I asked him if it happens normally. He dismissed my question, and I don't think the whole point about like saying it's still abortion. Like the whole point when he was talking about biological continuity, I don't think that's factual because like that wasn't in the point in question about the morality. The whole point and the whole argument I was going to give without him trying to cut me off, and the reason why I concluded is that like I just think he didn't track. Like I obviously didn't look good optically, but more so, I think I was able to give like if I reducted with miscarriages. Miscarriages still dismisses biological continuity and then being successful in the first place. And it's more consistent that it didn't like it failed. Like he even offered to substantiate, but he didn't. So like speaking from the wise, I don't obviously think it's more consistent for that. He said if, like even then, if it's more consistent than like that, if fails it's conditional. I agree. If more so, if the consequent isn't true that it is like successful in the first place, you could just apply modest talents and say that the if in itself can't be a hypothetical because it's not conceivable. Therefore, it can't really be accessible under epistemology or just like epistemic like granted applicability towards it. So because by our knowledge, it's just like an incoherent thing to say. So you could sit here and say the consequence of that, like from a meta perspective as well. So my bad counters that point, dismisses the preservation of qualitative identity. He backtracked during 201 and then conceded in like 544 that miscarriages happened, 1633 as well, conceded to the definition, which was analytical. So the whole point about it, obviously preserving a man, obviously if it isn't is the case, we shouldn't establish a more so moral agent, same value or same moral value if it is inconsistent. Because he sat there and said the conclusion is that because it's obviously immoral because it's killing a man. Okay, if the fetus isn't preserved, then no more so if isn't conceivable, then obviously it's the case that you can't establish that same moral value because it's obviously a real distinct entity. You cannot value it, and it's more so consistent. Obviously the if can't really be a hypothetical because like it's just extremely low, and if you grant that it is happen, just the chances are like it's just more parsimonious to assume that it didn't happen. Since the answer didn't answer that, that creates a moral dilemma. Obviously where it's morally the case for like the proposition that it is a man in the first place or will become a man. So if miscarriages happen, there isn't really a sure to say that it will become a menace. So like you could sit there and say it's more rhetorical. Like he did rhetorical minds. That's just why I believe like many people won. It's just rhetorical. Like I just believe I won based upon factuality and addressing the argument. Like it wasn't generally in consideration towards like about abortion in itself, the proposition about abortion. It was his argument. I don't think his argument was substantiated enough. So like that's my reasoning for why I won. Like I'm not sure if you could disagree. I just think I won because of that. So um one last thing, one last debate I'll cover. Even though I'm already showing myself, that's kind of egotistical. My bad. Let's go on with this one. It's pretty hyped up. It's pretty hyped up, essentially. So, so if I'm to cover this final debate, oh man, it's Modi versus Pucci. Well, actually, no, I don't want to cover that one. Which one do I want to cover? Which one do I want to cover? Which one do I want to cover? Holy shit! Which one is like just more talked about in general? Like, which one would be good? Which one would be good? Like, hmm, which one would be good? Fuck. I don't want to end my video with a low tier debate. Like, someone would be Kel versus Damar. Kel's like mid tier, in my opinion. Okay, so Eric versus Infinity. That's the most recent debate and most like talked about debate. In my opinion, I don't think Infinity countered anything at all. Even though he was talking about like, especially speaking, obviously more so about give me a second, bro. More so he was talking about personhood and etc. Obviously he's more so in I think he was talking about pro life because of personhood, but like obviously I don't think he countered Eric's like moral error theory type B perspective thing. So he didn't encounter. I don't think he really reducted the argument at all. Therefore, I'm gonna grant Eric the win because like I gotta make this short. May peace be upon you all, and I love you all. These were some of my verdicts. I hope you all enjoyed it, and like this is some commentary involved with the debates. More so, these are my verdicts. Like some people don't really refer to me as judge, but much like it's just something like that. I just granted that. Like it's just something to talk about. It's something fun to do. It's a hobby of mine. Like sometimes I get up here and I talk within the mic. Talk through a fucking recording bot. It's just in general like it's something to look upon. Like it's something to look forward to. See other people's thoughts. It's just kind of good because in the end, the quest for knowledge helps us as a species. As a species, we thrive, and the species we learn to love. Learning is the part of knowledge, so knowledge can be love. Okay, remember to use your knowledge wisely. Don't use it for bad things. Always make sure you do good deeds. Make sure you do good stuff. So I love you all, and may knowledge be the gift for you. Goodbye. I love you all. Peace out.